Hello and welcome to Casual Learning. I'm your host, John Bannan. Let's deal with the secrets of life, tip number 3. This tip is to keep your standards high. We all have standards by which we think we should live, but all our standards are at different levels. Some of us have much higher standards than other people do, and they have lower standards. But we all live or try to live to meet whatever standard we happen to have. So, a better life comes from having a better and higher standard that you expect from yourself and from others. So, the tip is keep your standard high. Keep it high. Um, we all live by a standard, which is generally something that we learn as children from our parents or our caregivers or the community that we live in. But you have no control over what that standard is that you're taught. So you may be taught a very low standard, or you may be taught a very high standard. But whatever standard it is that you believe can greatly impact how good a life you actually have. And it can certainly impact how good a life your children will live. Because as a parent, you will be the one teaching them what the appropriate standard for life is. So, if you teach your children a low standard, well, they're going to only live up to that low standard at best. And that means your children are going to lead low standard lives or lives. If you keep that standard high, then your children will attempt to reach that higher standard, and their lives are going to be better and will be in the pursuit of that higher standard. So, as a parent, you can have an immense effect on how your children live their life in the future, even into their old age, based on the standard that you teach them when they're young. Now, if you have a low standard, you can always raise it and learn a higher standard, but you generally only learn that from other people who have a higher standard. So it's usually a good idea to associate with people who have a higher standard and expectation for themselves and others in life. That's where you'll learn a higher standard. So you and you know you also want to avoid associating with people who have lower standards. That will tend to lower your own standard and make your life worse. Um, so basically, if you want to live a better life, then try to raise your own standard uh, in terms of greatness and morality. Um, and as you attempt to meet that higher standard, you will improve your life. And you'll also improve the people you associate with, because people with higher standards don't want to associate with people with lower standards. So as you raise your standard, those people with higher standards will want to associate with you, which will help you improve your standard and maybe even raise it higher. So also, you teach your children the standard that they're going to live by. So don't be surprised when they only live up to the standard that you gave them and not a higher standard. People are generally upset in their lives when they aren't living up to their learned standard, whatever that may be. And so they generally attempt to live up to that standard. So there's a striving and a motivation to live up to at least the standard you were taught. So if you have a higher standard, you're going to be better off than if you have a lower standard. So the corollary is whatever standards you teach your children it becomes the standard that your children strive for in life. So teach your children a higher standard and not a lower standard. If you keep your standards low and teach your children a lower standard, then your children aren't going to achieve much. If you teach them a higher standard, and if you have a higher standard, then expect your children to try to reach that higher standard, and you will have children that grow up into adults that achieve a lot, real achievers. Now, a standard is an expected level of living. It's not necessarily what a person actually does. It's more of an expectation of what somebody should do. So it's okay to demand that somebody behaves better or behaves to reach that higher standard, even though they haven't done that, because the standard itself should be higher and something that they should strive for. The pursuit of excellence and greatness and morality, these are all high standards and great standards to have for yourself and to teach your children. You should certainly point out when standards aren't being met and demand that those standards be met. Things generally only get better than the status quo when better standards are established and demanded. That's how things improve. Higher standards are demanded and expected, and there's consequences if those standards aren't met. That's how things get better and improve in general, and that includes the improvement of people or children. So keep your standards high. Keep them high for yourself. Keep them high for your children, and you will have a better life, and your children will have a better life. You keep your standards low and the standards for your children low, you're going to have a worse life, and your children are going to have a worse life as they grow up because chances are they're going to keep that low standard that you taught them. So keep your standards high. All right. I hope you learned something, and take care.